Hello, warriors and supporters. We welcome you back this week for episode 14 of CWF Presents CRPS/RSD is Real. Personal injury attorney Accident Abe joins us today. He's going to share with us how important it is that every settlement include a lifetime of care. So without any further ado, I give you episode 14.
Hello and welcome. My name is Kimberly Segelka. I'm a CRPS warrior and operations assistant with the CRPS Warriors Foundation. Today we get to speak to Accident Abe. He is a personal injury attorney who has helped CRPS patients and other patients with neurological conditions get the money they need for their pain and suffering and to take care of themselves in the future. So could you start off by telling us how having an attorney can benefit someone who has CRPS?
Sure. So lawyers are everywhere and they hit every field, but because CRPS is more, it's a mental because you're suffering pain, but it's a physical ailment. You're going to need lawyers for kind of different areas. And I do personal injury law. So essentially what I do is if someone gets injured in a car accident, in a slip and fall or some other incident where there's liability, civil liability, that's where I come in. So let's say I have a client who has fibromyalgia right now. She got rear-ended. Her fibromyalgia flared up, right? So if you didn't get a lawyer who knows that kind of about more of these neurological diseases, I guess we want to call them, then they would have just slight back pain and some neck pain, right? But I know it's a flare-up. So her actual medical records didn't change too much, but her injury changed a lot. And so when you get a lawyer who kind of knows about these details, they can fight for the money that you actually need in a personal injury case. So personal injury cases kind of work like this. Someone gets injured and then hopefully there's insurance and you ask them for some money. Some of that money goes for medical expenses and some of it goes property. So your car got lost, but the big chunk of it we go after is for the pain and suffering. That's generally the big ticket item. And with CRPS and fibromyalgia type stuff, the pain levels are just they come and they go and they're insane and they're all the time. They flow and they ebb and that's something that we have to fight for a lot more because it's not so available like a medical records. Like here's $10,000 for all these medical records. So in the personal injury world, that's where the attorney comes in. He can help fight for the pain and suffering that the person's going to go through. For like a work comp situation, those are good because in work comp you don't get pain and suffering. So that's the difference between personal injury and work comp, at least in California, right? So in California, work comp is like you get injured on the job or because of the job. You don't get pain and suffering. You only get medical bills and wage loss. So someone with CRPS, they need someone because this is a lifetime disease. So if they can't work for the rest of their lives, you need to make sure that that person's asking from the work comp insurance company for a lifetime of money because they're probably never going to be the same. Or even if they can work, it's going to be dialed back a lot. So you need that difference, right? And then I get calls all the time from former clients where they've gotten denied benefits because they have persistent back pain and they can't work anymore. Same thing with CRPS. You're going to need a disability attorney to fight for you. Let's say you didn't get hurt on the job or you didn't get hurt because of a car accident. And so there's no one really at fault. You just kind of got hurt, you slipped or something, and you got CRPS. You're going to need someone to give you that disability, those disability rights from the government. And that's where the attorneys come in with these kind of cases.
Okay. So when you're talking about personal injury or workman's comp, that is you're in trial with trying to get benefits from the insurance companies is what you're saying. I'm just trying to clarify.
The thing about cases, right, is that you sue someone who has no money, you're not getting anything. There's nothing there, right? So generally what we like to see is insurance companies. So when there's work comp injury, generally most people in California, if you're hiring employees, you're required by law to have workers' compensation insurance, right? And that'll take care of your employees in the sense of a work comp injury, right? But personal injury is a little bit different, right? People drive around with they drive around in California without insurance. You're required in California to have insurance, but some people don't have insurance. They'll drive around. You also have the problem of this. This is actually a bigger problem. People have insurance and then they get in accidents, but they have really bad insurance. You have a lifetime of pain and suffering, but the insurance company only has $15,000 to offer you because that's the policy they're writing. And then the guy has no house, he has no cars. So you're really not going after anything. And I guess just because I'm here, I'll kind of tell people how to protect themselves with this. In California, they offer this thing called uninsured or underinsured motorist insurance. That's an insurance you can buy with your own insurance, and it's kind of like you can sue your own insurance for someone else's fault. Like I have $500,000 on my car. So if someone hits me and they either have like no insurance or bad insurance, I can go after my own insurance for $500,000. And I encourage everyone to do that because it usually just costs like $30 more every 6 months. Protection's there just because the risk of people driving without insurance or good insurance is very likely. So it's better to protect yourself. And I recommend that to all my clients.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. I haven't thought about that. When you have something like CRPS or cases that you have had that fibromyalgia that are, like you said, a lifetime of pain, how does that change the case for you?
It changes the case because generally I deal with a lot of back problems and neck problems because a lot of people are getting rear-ended, right? It's either most people resolve or they get down to like 10%, back to 90% where they were before. They can still do a lot of stuff. They take a little bit of Advil when they need it, right? They do some stretches. Maybe they go to the chiropractor and they're back to their regular life, right? Sometimes you'll get surgeries and those are kind of like get more elaborate, but most people just kind of after a few months after the treatment we send them to, they're generally about 70 to 100% better, which I think is pretty good, right? CRPS though, it's not like that, right? It's a lifetime of pain. It's constant. It's ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's so debilitating a person can't get out of bed. So that's the big difference. We know it's going to be forever. I mean, hopefully they find a cure to it, but as of right now, it's more of a mitigation, right? So I think in terms of a personal injury case, it's like a lifetime of pain and suffering that I have to fight for or get money for. Because if you don't, and when you settle or you go to trial, that's it. You settle, that includes the first future pain and suffering too. And if you go to trial, you're asking for that future pain and suffering, 10 million, whatever it might be. That's kind of the difference between the traditional personal injuries in the personal injury case and the CRPS injuries.
Okay. How do you calculate what someone's pain and suffering for the rest of their life is?
There's experts that do this, right? We bring people in and they call it lifetime care plans. So they'll have doctors assess how much medical bills will be estimated for this person given their age and, their sex and, where they live. They'll be a predictor of medical expenses. And then we use that to kind of determine pain and suffering. Sometimes if it goes to trial, I like to use like an easier formula, say $100 a day, right? For the rest of his life, right? And then it adds up to like something like crazy, like $4 to $5 million, right? And then if it gets worse, so you kind of add it, I'm just using $100 as like an example, but $400, $500, it just becomes really easy to add it up for the pain and suffering.
Yeah. Wow. Kind of crazy to think about that amount of money when you're just living day to day and then thinking about what over your lifetime you'd be spending. So someone wants to reach out to see if you're able to help them. How do they do that? What's the beginning process to see if they qualify for a personal injury trial or lawsuit?
So what I do is my clients will call me, right? They'll say, hey, I slipped and fell or I got in this car accident, right? I say, okay, great. So slip and falls are a little bit more, they're like more hard to fight, but I'm just going to give a car accident just because it's a little more clean, because slip and falls they're more nuanced. So I get a call, somebody calls me and says they got in a car accident. Then I ask them what happened, right? If it's the person's fault that's calling me, they generally have no recourse because you can't really sue anybody if it's your fault. So let's say they got rear-ended. They say, okay, great. What are your injuries? Let's say they have neck pain, back pain, and that's generally what it is, right? Or if they have CRPS, right, and this is flaring that up or making it worse, now it's because it's going to be a different path, because I know that they're going to need specific kind of treatment with neurologists and specific doctors. And sometimes, so I have my own doctors, and sometimes I don't even send them to my doctors because they're already they have their train flowing. So I'm not trying to mess that up. They go back to their doctor and say, hey, I got in a car accident, this is what's going on, right? But let's say I get a client who never had CRPS before. They got some neck pain and some back pain. Now they have like some weird burning sensation in their arm, whatever, however it arises. Now they have CRPS. Now we send them to a couple special doctors that we have that will assess for CRPS. That becomes an evaluation, and we take that evaluation, we take it to the insurance company.
Okay.
But also another part I didn't talk about. Once I get the information, right? Like, let's say I got rear-ended, right? I do an investigation on the parties who hit my client, and I figure out how much money they have and if they have the insurance and what kind of insurance they have. So that's another approach. That's initially the approach we have to take, because we don't want to take all these medical expenses and just, we didn't get any like pain and suffering money. After the attorneys take their fees and then we pay back the medical bills, what's generally leftovers for the client. So if I have a $15,000 policy and I know the guy has CRPS, you're going to your regular medical doctors, and I'm just going to ask for $15,000 in pain and suffering, because I want you to get that. There's not as much money in your pocket for the pain and suffering as you can get. Essentially is what it is. The guy has $1 million policy. Now we know we have a lot of money to play with. We're still going to get the medical treatment, and we might send to more specialized doctors and get a full, like how we discussed, we get a full lifetime assessment plan, and then we ask for that $1 million. And we hope they say no. And I'll tell you why. Because if you give the insurance company a reasonable opportunity to settle and they don't, now you open up that $1 million to anything you want. And so generally those cases will go to trial. So we're not asking for $1 million anymore. We'll ask for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever it might be, $1 million.
Right. Wow. Those are big numbers.
Yeah. But CRPS is a big injury, it's a big disease. So yep. I do this a lot. So those numbers are like, make sense to me. But like when people hear $8 million, they're like, that's crazy amount of money. Yeah. But you'll see it.
Wow. So how long of a process is this?
Could be years, honestly. When people call me, they say, how long is this going to take? I say, it could be 6 months, could be 5, 6 years. So it just depends on how bad the insurance company's fighting. Because I used to work for the insurance companies and no one's ever hurt. So, and this is fake and they're doing, sometimes it just depends on how reasonable the other party you're dealing with is and if they're just going to dig your heels on your case. Because sometimes they do and you don't know why, but you just got to press forward.
Okay. So you're talking about the pain and suffering with the personal injury lawyer, and then with workman's comp, how is that different? You get workman's comp if you get injured at work, correct? And then if they don't cover everything, or if it's because you developed CRPS from the injury that you had at work, that's when you would then be looking for more money from the workman's comp insurance. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think so, yeah. So you get injured at work, you get CRPS, or you because of the job you're doing, you kind of like over time you get CRPS, right? So work comp, the same thing. They're an insurance company. You get work comp insurance, and what they're trying to do is pay you as little as money as possible, and then they get their own medical people to evaluate your injuries, and then you go in front of a hearing judge, and he has to approve the settlements if there is a settlement. If you can't settle, then he goes to a hearing in front of a work comp judge. So it's a little bit different than the personal injury world, yeah.
Okay. And does medical malpractice come into this at all? Is that something that you deal with, or is that a whole nother area of law?
Medical malpractice is a whole nother area of law, which an attorney would be helpful for. I actually got a call from somebody, I can't really disclose who because of attorney, but someone from CRPS Warriors Foundation. They said, hey, I think my doctor did some things that caused me to have CRPS because I never had it before. I have a buddy who does medical malpractice. So whenever I get these calls, I send them to him. And those are a little bit different because you have very expert heavy. So you need a lot of experts to say, they did this procedure wrong and this is what caused it. So it's generally medical malpractice cases are a fight with experts. So and rather than in front of a jury, it's more about experts. And a lot of healthcare providers require arbitration clauses now. So you might not even need to see a jury. And that's kind of, it's better for the insurance companies. It's not better for the people, I think.
Is there something you want to tell us about in regards to a case that you have going on that you want to share with us that could be useful information for somebody?
I have a case where my client has fibromyalgia, and then I don't have any CRPS cases right now, but she has fibromyalgia. She's actually one of my friends from high school. She called me and she's like, "Hey, I know you're a lawyer. I got rear-ended." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll send you to a chiropractor and a orthopedic doctor to kind of like assess you right away." She's like, "I already, I have fibromyalgia." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I really didn't know about, fibromyalgia. I did a seminar where they talked about CRPS, but I didn't know they're kind of related, right? They're very similar. They're
They're
neurological.
both nerve conditions. Yeah, neurological conditions.
So like, I was like, okay. So I learned about it and I was like, oh, so every day she would call me, I'm in more pain. She's like, I had my pain under control before. So instead of sending her to my doctor, she already had like her team. So just go to your team and I'll get the updates and I'll just keep asking for, in a couple months, I know exactly what's going to happen. Like I'm going to ask them for the policy limits, which was $30,000. And I hope they deny, because if they deny, now we have like an unlimited amount of money to go. And I think that they knew what was going on. So I got like 3 medical bills, told them she missed like 2 weeks of work, which was about 3-4 grand. And then they sent over the 30 grand right away. The good thing about this client is kind of like I was talking about earlier. She has an uninsured motorist policy of $100,000. So now we're going to we were pursuing that now too. So right now I'm just kind of getting the last bits of her recent medical records, and I'm going to demand $100,000, and hopefully they give it to us. Yeah. Wow. And so that's different because I monitor those cases a little bit different. And I actually sometimes tell them to keep pain journals, talk about today, write the day, how it affected them today versus yesterday. And that way that's tracking the pain levels. Let's say this happens today, right? But we're in a courtroom 4 or 5 years from now.
Right.
It's very hard to remember what happened 4 or 5 years ago, right? And especially if someone has fibromyalgia or CRPS, and it's like a daily thing from them, right? So they're not going to remember level 8 to level 7. It happened between a Tuesday and a Thursday, right? But that journal is very helpful to realize, like, last week I was at a 6 before the accident. Now I'm at a 9 out of 9 all the time. And that's very helpful for kind of tracking these kind of cases, which I highly recommend for these kind of cases.
It's such a good recommendation because, like you said, it could be 6 years from now, 5 years from now that you have to recall that information, and having the evidence, having it written down, you're not flustered or you're not forgetting, you're not, that makes a lot of sense. And that's good for anyone who's listening, even if they can't use that information right now to remember, because you don't know what's going to happen in your life. We're all driving around places. I can't personally drive because of my CRPS, but I'm in the car with other people driving. Yeah. And if something happened and they put me into flare, this is the kind of situation that you should then start recording how things have changed, right? Do you have any information about your colleague's CRPS case that you think would be helpful for people to know?
His name's Ali Razavi. He posted about 2 months ago. He got a $3 million settlement for CRPS. And he can't really disclose because they make you sign non-disclosures. But you can, when you get these big settlements, you get the other party to allow you to release the number. So you can advertise it as a part of your firm.
Okay.
So, but that's a good case because I'm sure there was some really good insurance that happened. Probably a commercial driver might have hit somebody, or it happened in a slip and fall situation. Because those generally, if you go to Albertsons, I know they have big insurance policies, and commercial drivers are supposed to have big policies. Or if you're ever driving an Uber, they have tiers of coverage. They have up to like $10 million in coverage. So if you were driving an Uber and someone hit you, you can sue, or it's the Uber driver's fault. You can sue the Uber driver, and there's a big policy there. So.
Can you talk about how you first were introduced to knowing what CRPS was, and then how you decided you wanted to become a resource for the foundation?
I was in a couple of personal injury seminars where they're talking about newer diagnoses that are being underdiagnosed. So I had like a neurologist, and he was talking about fibromyalgia, CRPS, and that was the first time I ever heard about it. And then I'm in a networking group, and then I met Deb. She was actually the first person I talked to in the whole meeting. She gave a presentation. She was like, I'm the founder of CRPS Warriors Foundation. I was like, you what? There's a whole foundation about this? And then we had got to talking, and then the more I looked into it, the more I realized, like the more that's how I got more involved in this, to the CRPS injury and trying to get more, become more of an expert in it, have a better understanding of it, so I can serve that population a little bit more. And my buddy got a $3 million case. Selfishly, it's like I hope no one ever gets it, right? Like that's the thing with lawyers. We're here to pick up the pieces after the things have happened. So it's a good case. These are good cases if you can get somebody who has CRPS objectively, we can put on a, like the neurologist can show this is how it happened. That's a good case to present to an insurance company. So we're able to help offer our services to the person who's injured. And the more we know about it, the better we can be at negotiating with the insurance company who's saying this is not a real condition. It's, it's made up or whatever. Because I've heard these arguments even with fibromyalgia. I've talked to doctors who say it's kind of like, that's more in your head, right? And I'm like, it's not. If you know somebody who has it, like it's not in their head. That's kind of how I got more involved in this, through Deb, through my own wanting to understand and my own wanting to serve this clientele.
Thank you.
I feel like the more that you have successful settlements, the more likely it is they will continue in that direction if insurance companies are then aware of the condition and you don't have to fight as hard for it, maybe.
Yeah, I think it legitimizes the injury. And I think that the more we bring these cases when they arise, because they're fighting, they're saying, there's no way, you need some experts neurological experts to diagnose these. But when we do these and we get some settlements on these, I think, especially some bigger ones, I think eventually you see like a $15, $30 million settlement on these. Once you get some of those and the insurance companies start paying out, they'll pay out early rather than later, because they'll realize, okay, these things are real. There's doctors, and the public is actually becoming more aware of this. And then in turn, the juries accept these diagnoses and these injuries.
Is there anything that you want to share you think that would be helpful for the CRPS community that we haven't talked about?
Just generally speaking, I know that when I take cases, my biggest advice to my clients is make sure you stick with your medical treatment. And I know these are for people who don't have CRPS, right? They're having trouble going to the doctor because life, right? They have kids, or they don't feel like going to the doctor that day, right? But those things really affect your case. So CRPS, go to your doctor just because you got to go to your doctor. But if you're in a personal injury case and someone injured you, and you want to make sure you're going to your doctor, because the minute you miss one or two doctor's appointments, the insurance company is going to hone in on that and say, how injured was this person if they're missing their doctor's appointments, right? And reasonably, you could say, they were too much pain to go that day. But, I know it's hard, but you just got to do it, essentially is what it is, because it's really going to affect your case. That's kind of my biggest advice if you're going to do a personal injury case.
Okay, that's great. So if you're on the West Coast and we can't come directly to you and we're looking for a personal injury lawyer, what's some advice of what we should be looking for in a personal injury lawyer?
You want someone who has a few years of experience. Some of the newer guys, nothing against the newer guys, but these cases take a bankroll sometimes because you have to pay your experts, and experts don't get paid on the back end. They get paid on the front end. You need someone also who has a good network of doctors that can send you to neurologists who have maybe an emphasis or specialty in CRPS or, fibromyalgia stuff, doctors that have those kind of specialties, right? And so I have a network out here in California where I have chiropractors, and if I don't know a chiropractor or a neurologist or a physical therapist, I have a team that can go get me one. But that's only in California, right? So you want someone who has a lot of resources for you. And you want someone who's Google them. You can Google them, but check them out on the state bar. Make sure they have a clean record. Make sure that there's nothing real bad about it. Make sure that they're not getting sanctioned for something that raises some red flag. And another recommendation is talk to 2 or 3 attorneys before you make your decision. Not every attorney is right for every person. It's like, dating, right? You don't marry everyone, but you marry the one, but you have to date a little bit before you marry the one. So, those are my recommendations. And then you can always call me. I have a big network of attorneys. So if someone needs a recommendation in this state or in that state, I can find someone or at least get 2 or 3 leads to send you on your way.
Thank you. That's really helpful and really kind of you to offer. And those are great tips.
I saw on your website, like, you offer a free consultation. Is that kind of like a standard across that a lot, like you're saying, talk to multiple lawyers? Do you think, is that a lot of times they'll give you a free consultation for you to get a feel of what they're like?
Yeah. So the personal injury world is generally free consultations because the attorneys take their fees on a percentage basis. So whatever they can recover, they'll take a percentage of that. In California, traditionally, it's about a third to 40%, whatever they can recover. So that's why they generally don't charge the client till they get the recovery on what they can collect, essentially is what it is.
Okay. And if, say you went to trial with the settlement case and it didn't settle or you didn't win, what happens then? Does the client then owe you guys legal fees?
Generally, if a case it doesn't pan out the way we want it to, the attorney swallows all the costs. So all the fees, the court fees, all the fees preparation, that's also the risk of, not the risk, but the part that's why the attorney collects on the back end, because they know most of their clients can't really dish out that kind of money for the trial. And that's why they take such a high percentage, because the risk is also a lot on the attorney. And then also, so here's another nuance, maybe for people who are listening. If you have CRPS, stick with your doctors, because they have these doctors on lien. And what happens is, let's say the case doesn't pan out. Sometimes these doctors will still try and collect from the person. Okay. Even though that it was kind of like an unknown agreement between like the doctors and the attorneys. Hey, if we don't win, we're not going to really collect our fee, but you kind of like, you don't go after our clients because we have that relationship where we send you clients and you take care of them, kind of thing. But I've seen some doctors just still go after them if it doesn't pan out.
Okay. That's something to think about for sure when you're going through. I bet there's so much to think about when you're going through a trial, and so much information you probably need. Yeah, it's got to be a lot. But when you're talking about the difference between having money to go to all your doctor's appointments and take care of yourself for the rest of your life when you can't work anymore, I think it's worth the stress.
Trial's only like 2 weeks long. It's getting to that point that takes years, right? Like, okay. It takes years, right? If you're ever in a personal injury case, these things move slow, right? Unless it's, here's a $15,000 policy. We know she has CRPS. We're not going to fight you. Here's the money. Leave us alone. That happens, but most of the time, it's like $1 million, $2, $3 million policy. They're going to fight you tooth and nail up until the day before trial. I mean, they might even let it go to trial. So it's a process. Be patient, and then hopefully you got the right attorney who'll keep you updated throughout the process, because it is a very slow process. And then I get a lot of clients initially who call me every day, like, what's going on with my case? I'm like, this could take 6 months to like 5 years. So just when there's an update, I'll let you know. You just do this. You go to your treatment and let me worry about everything else. That's what I tell my clients.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's hard to hand over the reins sometimes. So you just have to be patient. Sure. Take good notes of what's going on in your life and your pain and your treatments, right? And then just wait until you need the information you need, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why you got the lawyer. Otherwise you deal with it yourself. You know, like, let me do the stuff I'm supposed to do. That's my job. And it's okay to stress, and we'll have the conversations. And sometimes we'll even send them to therapists to help them through the process, because it's not only physical, it's emotional, it's mental. There's a lot of things that get involved in CRPS cases. So
absolutely. And that in itself could flare somebody's pain, just going through that process, increasing the stress. So that's great that you offer possible therapy for people if they need it, because that could definitely be something to trigger somebody. Is there anything else that's coming to mind for you that you want to share?
I mean, I guess if you ever find yourself in a case, a personal injury case, make sure you keep your records. If you have to quit your job for some reason or you get laid off, make sure you get your pay stubs, because that's going to prove how much income you were making before. You're going to have a lifetime of wage loss to include in that. Those are also things that we can prove, but people forget about those on this back end. But there's a lot of value there that you don't want to leave on the table, because income is what pays your bills, right? Pain and suffering will be one chunk of it. But then your wage loss, your future wage loss with future income, you're losing that too, and you want to account for that. And providing documentation to the insurance companies, let's say a W-2 or a 1099 or whatever it might be, or just your past 6 months pay stubs. That's very helpful in showing them this is how much I was making. I'm probably not going to be able to work. I might not be able to work at this level again. And so I need to get paid for this for the rest of my life, essentially, is what we have to consider as well.
Okay. Those are great tips. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all your information with us. This is stuff that I did not know about. And now that we've talked, and I think that the people who are listening have heard, they'll either be able to see how that it connects to their own life currently, or if something happens down the road, like you said, especially with car accidents, creating flares, they then know how to proceed properly so that they get the coverage and the benefits that they need to be able to talk to you and get the most out of.
I know I'm not licensed to practice in every state, but sometimes people call me and I'll just tell them in my state, like, this is how it works. But generally, I think I can help even like answer some questions because I know the ins and outs of this. Logic says how good a case should be, right? So I could just answer some questions initially before they find an attorney to kind of tell them, hey, go to your doctor right away. Like, go like right now. You got in a car, so go right away. You know, you slipped and fell. Make sure your treatment, like, you get to the doctor right away. I know you have a doctor's appointment in a week, but you need to go right now just to make sure you're okay. And those kind of things are very helpful because they preserve the record later on that the insurance companies can't fight saying, well, they waited a week to go to the doctor just because they had a doctor's visit. And you hear me talking about insurance companies a lot, but that's because it's their money you're fighting for. So for your client, essentially, is what it is.
Thank you so much for sharing all your information with us. We really appreciate it. And for being willing for people to be able to reach out to you, because I think that could be really helpful, knowing that there's an attorney who knows what CRPS is, believes you, and is willing to give you some advice before you find someone, even if you're not in the same state as you and you personally can't help. At least there's someone to start to reach out to, because a lot of times reaching out to someone who has no idea what CRPS is can be very frustrating. And thank you for offering to do that. I think that's a really big deal.
My pleasure.
Well, it was very nice to meet you. If something comes up where you end up getting a CRPS case, or you settle your fibromyalgia one and you want to talk about it, if there's anything that you want to come back on and talk about, we'd be more than happy to have you on again. So
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for having me to discuss this stuff.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share all that wonderful information and for everything that you do for your clients. It's truly wonderful and comforting to know that there are people out there like you that will go above and beyond and take the time to point in the right direction if you can't help. So thank you again. If anybody would like to get in touch with Accident Abe, his information is in the description of this episode. You can also find it on our website, crpswarriorsfoundation.org. Our next support group is right around the corner on the 7th. If you haven't signed up yet, you can find the registration links on our website under the Events tab or on our Facebook under the Events tab. We also have Rockfest coming up pretty quick here at the end of September. If you would like to be involved with the silent auction items that are being donated, please reach out to the contact information provided in the description of the episode. To support the podcast or the foundation, please text CWF Podcast to 53555. And if you'd like to stay up to date and in the loop with all of our events and support groups, you can follow us on social media or subscribe to our newsletter. As always, it's been a pleasure, and we will be back on the 1st. See you then.